Well, thank you for joining us for our next installment of our small group study. We're going to be talking about Israel as they leave Egypt and head toward the Promised Land. And why don't we start reading in Exodus chapter 15?
Sure. I'll start at verse 1. Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name.
All right, so this is perhaps the oldest hymn in the Bible. And, you have the book of Psalms, which is full of hymns, and that's kind of usually what we think of when we think of songs of praise and worship to God, hymns. Obviously, this comes way before that. And one of the things we want to understand is, the context in which this happens. And, we have here, Israel has been taken out of the land of bondage in Egypt, but Pharaoh has decided to chase them, and his army has been destroyed in the Red Sea as God miraculously made a way for Israel to cross over and then swallowed up Egypt's army as they attempted to chase them. And that's the context here for this hymn, but there's a wider context to this, and that's the context of creation, understanding what praise is and why it is appropriate. In order to do that, we have to really kind of look back at creation. And so if I were to ask you guys, what's the point of creation, what would you say? I know that's an easy, small question, but what would you say as a result?
Reveal God's glory.
Okay.
And to share his glory with the creation as well. And,
Okay.
and that the creation will be glorious.
Right. So the idea is that, if you have a painter and, we can take something maybe a little bit easier if you have a writer, let's say, and Stephen King writes what kind of books?
Big ones.
Big ones, yes. Wordy
Horror.
ones. Yeah, horror. And John Grisham writes what kind of books?
Legal thrillers.
Legal
There you
thrillers,
go.
okay.
I was going to say legal something. I couldn't pull thriller out.
Okay.
Legal horror.
Legal horror, yes. Is there any other kind?
Yeah, I was gonna say, those go together.
Yeah. So they write the kind. There are certain patterns to their writing, and that comes from the fact that they are certain kinds of people. When you look at Stephen King, you say, "Here is a horror writer," but you know what I'm saying. Like
Sure.
there's John Grisham has a background in law. And you can go across. This is true for pretty much all artists, right? The art springs from the artist,
Yeah.
and with God, the creation springs from who He is, and so it reflects His character and nature, and it reveals His character and nature. And there's always some of His character and nature imparted to that thing. There's part of the artist imparts some of his glory to the work, right? So if we take Michelangelo and we take the statue of David, there when we say that David is the creation of Michelangelo, then what do we mean by that? What do we mean that David is the creation of Michelangelo? What are we really getting at? And you can say, in a sense, that your children are your creation, right? You can say, there's a connection here that I'm trying to get you guys to say, unless I'm asking a question in a really helpful way.
So
Do you even know what I asked there?
So you're saying that the art comes from them? It's
So when we say
They're a
that
conduit
something
for
is
God's
a
creation?
creation of something, what do we really mean?
something is being made manifest.
Right. So the creation is the embodiment of something spiritual in the Creator, and it's being made manifest in some physical form.
Yeah.
That was on the tip of my tongue.
Right, yes. But it was on his. Catch up, Chad, come on. Now, the point here is that, do you guys understand what I'm saying
Sure.
by that? So there's, art is a very interesting thing, and it's not just art. You know, you can say the same thing about people's homes or whatever. The interesting thing is when we create anything, there is something spiritual that is being made manifest in a physical way. And that's an interesting thing. So think about when you guys were kids, did you guys ever create anything artistic, or did you guys have inventions that you made when you were young, when you were kids, anything like that?
Yeah.
We made forts.
Forts?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Played with
No art.
Legos.
Right.
Zero
But
art.
but what happened is you had something in your mind, right? You had an idea of what you were going to create. And you then went about making that thing real. And so there's an element of where creation is kind of a piece of the creator that's made real and made manifest. And so when we look at God and the fact that he made this creation, he created the world, he created the garden, he created the animals, he created the trees and plants in the garden, he made the walls around the garden, he put Adam and Eve into the garden. We have to understand that there's a manifestation of God in that. And what is God making that out of? What does God create out of?
Nothing.
Nothing, right? And so we could say in a sense that there is something that is not complete. Nothing is not the appropriate manifestation of the glory of God, right?
Sure.
But that the garden is that, and that Adam and Eve live in that. And God called Adam and Eve to work and keep the garden. And so their job was to participate in this creation of God. And what we see, interestingly enough, in every nation or land after the creation story is we see what you might say is a recapitulation of the creation story. And what that means is that every time somebody establishes a house or a city or a nation in the Bible, they're reestablishing or there's a recapitulation of the creation story. And what is fascinating about that is that those don't tend to go all that well, right? So what's the problem with Egypt? Why is it that God is leading His people out of Egypt? What's the problem? Why don't they just stay in Egypt?
Worship the wrong God.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not submitting to God's ultimate leadership.
right. And what does that result in?
Tyranny.
Tyranny, right? So what's happened is that Israel has cried out to God because of the tyranny that they're living under. And is tyranny a proper reflection of who God is?
No.
No, it's not. And so the problem that we have is we have a creation that was supposed to be a blessing. It was supposed to manifest in many ways the character and nature of God. And that's what human beings are supposed to be living in. And at every time a house or a nation is established, you have basically a regardening, if you will. And the problem is that they always go wrong. Now, why would I say that every time you have a house or a nation, a city, you have a regardening? Can you think of any relationship between any kind of nation and the garden?
Well, I mean, every nation is founded on some set of like spiritual principles, if you will.
Right.
And the nation is making those manifest.
Yeah. And the other thing is the nation is, or the household or whatever, is the place where you experience life. It's the context in which your life happens. And so you can kind of think about it in the standpoint of sometimes it's easiest to get things as small as possible. You can kind of think of a household. And I spoke recently in a sermon about this household where there was 13 family members, I think it was.
Yeah, I
Do you
think I know what
remember?
you're talking about. The family.
There's 13 kids.
13
right?
kids?
13 kids. Yeah. So
total of 15 people.
Yeah, so there was 13 kids in this family and 15 people. And what is the experience of those children?
Well, you want specific examples?
Yeah, like what
Well,
did they
I saw
experience growing up?
Tyranny. They were prisoners. They
Uh-huh.
were chained, shackled to beds, some put in cages.
Yeah.
Various levels of punishment and restriction depending on certain behavior.
Yeah, and so that's kind of their garden, right? Those kids are growing up, and that's their garden. That's their experience of life. And in fact, it was kind of their only experience of
Right,
life.
right.
They didn't know how to speak properly because they never spoke with strangers. They only spoke with each other. The parents very rarely spoke to them, and so they spoke to their brothers and sisters. But, you know, how much can a kid who's a couple years older than you teach you about language if he never experiences being talked to, or you know what I'm saying, that there, so you have this, we can say that the household is like a walled garden, and the problem is that walled garden is not reflecting the glory of God. So our physical surroundings have to they have to reflect the goodness and the glory of God. And when you look at what's going on in Egypt, what's the problem? Like where are the deficiencies? Why is Egypt a tyranny?
Well, each of those things you just talked about are inaccurate in some quality.
Mm-hmm.
So the wrong form. They're not worshiping the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I guess, a spiritual darkness, not necessarily. Although in the curses, there's definitely
Right.
darkness. But it obviously wasn't reflecting God's character and goodness and what He would have wanted.
Uh-huh. And so what God is going to do then is he's going to take his people out of that place, and he's going to lead them into the promised land. And just like in the garden, man was to participate in this because we are part of the forming of any kind of household or city or nation. It's not that we're not players in that, right? We are part of that. And so God is going to bring his people out of Egypt, which is a place that, you know, the young men have been being murdered, the babies are being murdered. There's labor that has no blessing associated with it. There's the worship of the wrong gods. There's the inability to celebrate who God is. There's a number of things that are problems here. And God is going to take his people and he's going to put them in a new place, and they are going to be part of creating this new garden that matches the glory of God.